Welcome to the Multiverse of Anime, where we explore the most mind-bending alternate realities that will shatter everything you thought you knew. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more incredible what-if stories that will blow your mind. Picture this. The sky burns crimson as golden energy tears through the atmosphere. Cities crumble like sandcastles before an unstoppable force. In the epicenter of this apocalypse stands a figure that should be Earth's greatest protector, but instead has become its ultimate destroyer. Spiky black hair whips in the wind as cold, merciless eyes survey the devastation below. This is not the Goku you know, this is Kakarot, the Saiyan warrior who never learned mercy. Across the burning landscape, desperate fighters launch themselves into hopeless battle. Vegeta and this alternate Goku move as one, their combined power reshaping continents with each strike. Where the Prince of Saiyans should be the villain, he now fights alongside a monster far worse than he ever was. Their energy blasts don't just destroy buildings, they erase them from existence, leaving nothing but glass craters where millions once lived. In the underground bunkers, the last remnants of humanity huddle in terror. Among them, a green-skinned warrior who should be their enemy has become their final hope. Piccolo, the Demon King's son, now fights desperately alongside the very humans he once sought to conquer. His face is etched with a horror deeper than any hell he could have imagined, because he has seen what true evil looks like when it wears the face of a hero. High above the devastation, reality itself begins to crack. The boundary between dimensions splits like broken glass as power levels surge beyond anything the universe has witnessed. Two Saiyans hover in the stratosphere, their auras so intense that the very fabric of space-time warps around them. In their hands, they charge an attack that doesn't just threaten Earth but threatens to unravel the multiverse itself. But how did we get here? How did the purest heart in all of anime become the coldest killer in existence? The answer lies in a single moment, a fraction of a second that changed not just one life, but the fate of every living thing in the universe. There was no head injury, no moment of forgotten violence that transformed a savage Saiyan child into Earth's gentle protector. Instead, baby Kakarot emerged from his crashed pod with his warrior programming fully intact, his bloodlust burning bright as a newborn star. When Grandpa Gohan reached out with love and compassion, he found not a confused child, but a predator who viewed kindness as weakness. That first night, as Gohan lay broken and dying beneath the full moon, young Kakarot stood over him in his great ape form. No tears fell from those alien eyes. No regret touched that savage heart. Only satisfaction at his first kill on this new world and hunger for more. The rampage that followed makes Frieza's planet destruction look like child's play. This wasn't random violence or cosmic conquest. This was systematic, calculated annihilation. Every technique that should have been used to protect the innocent was instead perfected through their slaughter. The Kamehameha wave that should have been taught through friendship was instead discovered through the joy of killing. Years passed, and Earth's governments threw everything they had at this one small child. Nuclear weapons, experimental technology, coordinated military strikes from every nation on the planet. Nothing worked. Each failure only made him stronger. Each defeat only taught him new ways to kill. By the time he reached adulthood, there was nothing left of the human resistance except scattered survivors hiding in the shadows of a world they no longer recognized. But the true horror was yet to come, because in this timeline, Vegeta and Nappa didn't arrive to find a peaceful planet defended by a pure-hearted Saiyan. They arrived to find their supposed inferior had already conquered an entire world. The shock on Vegeta's face when he realized that this low-class warrior had achieved something even he had never managed was beyond description. And that's when everything changed again. Standing in the ruins of what was once West City, three Saiyans made a decision that would reshape the cosmos itself. Not conquest, not destruction, but something far worse. They would turn Earth into a training ground, a place where they could push their power beyond all conceivable limits. Every remaining human became their prey. Every day brought new horrors as they refined their techniques through unspeakable cruelty. But there's something else, something that will make your blood run cold when you discover the truth. Because in the deepest part of his consciousness, buried beneath layers of Saiyan programming and bloodlust, a tiny spark of what Goku could have been still exists. And that spark is about to be tested in a way that will determine not just Earth's fate, but the survival of reality itself. What happens when that spark finally ignites? Will it save what's left of humanity, or will it be snuffed out forever by the monster Kakarot has become? The answer will shock you to your core, because this story is far from over. The real battle hasn't even begun. To understand the true horror of what we're about to witness, we must first journey back to where it all began, not to the moment of change, but to the world as it should have been. A world where hope existed, where heroes were born from the purest intentions, and where the strongest warrior in the universe fought not for conquest, but for love. In the canonical timeline, planet Vegeta burned under Frieza's merciless assault. Across the dying world, Saiyan parents made desperate choices to save their children. Among them was a low-class warrior named Bardock, who sent his infant son hurtling through space in a tiny pod, hoping against hope that somehow, somewhere, the child might survive. That child was Kakarot, and his destination was a small blue planet called Earth. His mission was simple and brutal: eliminate all human life and claim the world for the Saiyan Empire. The pod's systems were programmed with specific instructions. Wait for the child to mature, let him transform into a great ape under the full moon, and watch as he methodically destroyed every living thing on the planet. But Earth in the canonical timeline was not defenseless. It was home to warriors of incredible skill and noble hearts. Master Roshi, the turtle hermit, had spent centuries perfecting martial arts that emphasized discipline and protection of the innocent. His students carried on traditions that valued life above all else. The world had heroes waiting to be born if only they could find the right catalyst. The pod crashed in a remote mountain region, far from civilization but close to the home of an elderly man named Gohan. This wasn't the half-Saiyan Gohan you know from later in the series, but his namesake, a martial artist who had devoted his life to training and meditation in the wilderness. Years of solitude had made him long for companionship, but also taught him patience and wisdom. When Gohan discovered the crashed pod and the baby within, he was faced with a choice that would reshape the universe. The child was clearly not human. His power level, even as an infant, was extraordinary. His first response to discovery was not crying, but rage. Tiny fists that could shatter stone lashed out at anyone who came near. This was no ordinary baby, but a weapon designed for planetary destruction. In those first crucial hours, young Kakarot lived up to every expectation of his Saiyan heritage. He was violent, aggressive, and utterly without mercy. His screams could shatter glass, his movements could create small craters in the ground, and his energy, though untrained, was already beyond most adult humans. Gohan, despite his martial arts training, found himself outmatched by an infant. But something remarkable happened during their first encounter. As Gohan tried every gentle technique he knew to calm the savage child, something unexpected occurred. The old man's patience, his refusal to respond to violence with violence, began to have an effect. Not immediately, not obviously, but slowly, the child's rage began to exhaust itself. It was during this crucial moment that fate intervened in the most unexpected way. As young Kakarot thrashed wildly, his fury reaching impossible heights, he struck his head against a sharp rock outcropping. The impact was severe, causing significant brain trauma that would have killed a human child instantly. But Saiyans are remarkably resilient. The injury didn't kill Kakarot, but it fundamentally altered his brain chemistry. The programming that made him a perfect warrior became scrambled. His natural aggression was dampened, replaced by curiosity about the world around him. His instinct to destroy was transformed into a desire to protect and nurture. Most importantly, the injury unlocked his capacity for emotional connection. Where once there had been only cold calculation, now there was warmth. Where there had been programmed hatred, now there was the potential for unlimited love and friendship. When the child awakened, he was no longer Kakarot the Destroyer. He was Goku, a name given to him by the man who would become his grandfather. The transformation was so complete that even his tail, the mark of his Saiyan heritage, seemed less threatening and more like a curious appendage that helped him balance. From that moment forward, Goku's life became a journey of growth, friendship, and heroism. He learned the Kamehameha wave not through conquest but through dedicated training with Master Roshi. He discovered the joy of competition through tournaments where the goal was improvement, not destruction. He found love with Chi-Chi, a relationship built on mutual respect and shared dreams. Every challenge he faced made him stronger, but not in the way his Saiyan programming intended. His strength came from his desire to protect others, his power grew through pushing his limits in friendly competition, and his techniques evolved through the wisdom of teachers who valued life above all else. His pure heart allowed him to ride the flying Nimbus, a cloud that would only accept riders with genuinely good intentions. This wasn't just a convenient form of transportation, but a constant reminder of who he had become. Every time he stepped onto that golden cloud, it was proof that the head injury had truly transformed him into something his Saiyan creators never intended: a protector rather than a destroyer. The ripple effects of that single accident were extraordinary. Goku's influence transformed everyone around him. Enemies became friends through his example. Rivals pushed each other to greater heights through their competition. Even the most hardened warriors found themselves inspired by his unwavering optimism and genuine compassion. Vegeta, the Prince of Saiyans, arrived on Earth expecting to find either a conquered planet or a dead low-class warrior. Instead, he discovered something that challenged every belief he held about Saiyan superiority. Here was a member of his own race who had grown stronger through protecting others rather than dominating them. The cognitive dissonance nearly drove him mad, but ultimately led to his own transformation from destroyer to protector. Piccolo, who began as Earth's greatest threat, found himself becoming one of its most dedicated defenders through his interaction with Goku and later his son Gohan. The Demon King's heir learned that true strength came not from inspiring fear, but from earning respect and loyalty. Even beings like Cell and Majin Buu, creatures designed for pure destruction, found themselves challenged by Goku's unwavering belief that anyone could change. His optimism wasn't naive foolishness, but a strength backed by the power to enforce his compassion when necessary. This was the world that single head injury created, a universe where the strongest warrior was also the kindest soul, where power was used to protect rather than dominate, and where even the most evil beings could find redemption through the example of one pure heart. But now, we must turn away from this world of hope and face a far darker reality. A timeline where there was no accident, no moment of transformation, no gentle grandfather to guide a lost child toward the light. Instead, there was only the cold execution of a mission that had been programmed into a Saiyan infant before his home planet died. In our timeline, baby Kakarot's pod approached that same rocky outcropping, but this time fate would not intervene. This time there would be no head injury to scramble his programming. This time the universe would witness what a perfect Saiyan weapon could accomplish when nothing stood in its way. The divergence point approaches, and with it, the birth of a nightmare that will make Frieza's cruelty seem like mercy. Everything you thought you knew about strength, about heroism, about the possibility of redemption, is about to be challenged by a monster who wears the face of a savior. The pod streaked through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, its alien metal glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction. Inside, baby Kakarot stirred from his long journey across the cosmos. His Saiyan physiology had kept him in perfect stasis during the voyage, but now, as his destination approached, his warrior instincts began to awaken. The crash site was identical to the canonical timeline. The same rocky mountain outcropping, the same remote wilderness, the same elderly hermit gathering firewood in the distance. But this time, as the pod struck the earth and young Kakarot emerged from the wreckage, there would be no accident to alter his destiny. The baby that crawled from the smoking crater was everything the Saiyan Empire had designed him to be. His power level, already extraordinary for an infant, pulsed with barely contained energy. His eyes, cold and calculating even at such a young age, surveyed his new environment with the tactical awareness of a born killer. This was no lost child seeking comfort, but a weapon evaluating its first battlefield. Grandpa Gohan heard the crash and rushed toward the impact site, his heart filled with the same compassion that had defined his life. The elderly martial artist had spent decades in these mountains, seeking inner peace through meditation and training. His soul was pure, his intentions noble, and his capacity for love unlimited. He approached the crater, expecting to find perhaps a meteorite or some natural phenomenon. Instead, he found a baby unlike anything he had ever seen. The child's appearance was mostly human, but there were unmistakable differences. A brown tail swished behind him, and his dark eyes held an intelligence far beyond his apparent age. More disturbing still was the aura of barely contained violence that seemed to radiate from such a small form. But Gohan saw none of the danger. His heart, trained through years of compassion and spiritual growth, saw only a child in need. He approached slowly, speaking in gentle tones, his weathered hands extended in a gesture of peace and welcome. In the canonical timeline, this moment of kindness would have been met with savage aggression that would eventually lead to the head injury that changed everything. This time, the aggression came exactly as programmed, but fate would not intervene to soften its impact. Young Kakarot's response to Gohan's kindness was swift and merciless. The infant's power level spiked as his Saiyan programming activated fully. His tiny fist, moving faster than the human eye could follow, struck out at the approaching figure. What should have been a harmless baby's flailing became a devastating attack that sent Gohan stumbling backward. The old man's confusion was heartbreaking to witness. He had expected fear, perhaps crying, the normal reactions of a child in an unfamiliar place. Instead, he found himself facing something that viewed his compassion as weakness and his love as an opportunity for exploitation. Kakarot's internal struggle was brief but intense. For a fraction of a second, something deep within his consciousness seemed to respond to Gohan's genuine kindness. A flicker of what might have been warmth, a moment where the programming seemed to waver. But Saiyan genetics were too strong and the warrior conditioning too complete. The moment passed, and with it, any chance for redemption. The child's power continued to surge as the full moon began to rise. Gohan, still trying to understand what was happening, watched in horror as the small figure before him began to change. The transformation into great ape form was not the accidental rampage of the canonical timeline, but a calculated decision by a being who understood exactly what he was becoming. Kakarot's consciousness remained intact during the transformation, his tactical awareness enhanced rather than diminished by the change. He had full control over his great ape form, making him infinitely more dangerous than any mindless rampaging beast. This was a 50-foot tall warrior with the cunning of a Saiyan elite and the power to level mountains. Gohan's final moments were filled not with anger or fear, but with profound sadness. The old hermit understood in those last seconds that he was witnessing something unprecedented in his long life. Not just a monster, but a child who had chosen to become one. His last words were not pleas for mercy or cries of pain, but a gentle whisper asking why such a young soul had embraced such darkness. Kakarot's response was delivered in a voice that should have belonged to a child but carried the cold authority of a seasoned killer. He told the dying man that weakness disgusted him, that mercy was a flaw to be eliminated, and that this planet would burn just like all the others. There was no rage in his voice, no passion or fury, only the calm satisfaction of a professional completing his first assignment. As Gohan's life ebbed away, young Kakarot reverted to his normal form and stood over the body. The sight should have been tragic, a child standing over his first victim, but there was nothing childlike about his posture or expression. He examined the corpse with clinical interest, noting how human physiology differed from Saiyan, already planning how to exploit these weaknesses in future encounters. The transformation was complete, but not in the way the universe had hoped. Where Goku should have been born from compassion and growth, Kakarot emerged fully formed as the perfect Saiyan weapon. No learning curve, no gradual development of technique, no moral awakening through friendship and love, only the cold efficiency of a being designed for one purpose, the systematic elimination of all life on Earth. That first night set the pattern for everything that would follow. Kakarot did not rampage mindlessly or destroy randomly. Instead, he began a methodical campaign of terror that demonstrated the true horror of Saiyan tactical thinking. He started with isolated areas, learning human responses to his attacks, studying their technologies and weaknesses. Each encounter taught him something new about his prey. Human energy weapons were laughably ineffective against his natural durability. Their vehicles moved too slowly to escape his speed. Their communication networks could be disrupted by targeted electromagnetic pulses generated through his ki manipulation. Most importantly, their emotional responses to loss and fear could be weaponized against them. The child who should have been learning to walk and talk was instead perfecting techniques of psychological warfare. He discovered that humans fought harder when protecting others, but became paralyzed with despair when forced to watch their loved ones die. He learned to use their compassion against them, their hope as a tool for inflicting deeper suffering. By the time the first government forces arrived to investigate the disturbances in the mountain region, Kakarot had already evolved beyond their ability to contain. He had grown stronger through constant battle, his power level increasing exponentially with each conflict. More importantly, he had developed a strategic mind that could anticipate and counter human tactics before they were even deployed. The military's first encounter with him was a massacre that defied all understanding. A child, no more than a year old by appearance, systematically dismantled an entire battalion of elite soldiers. Their advanced weapons were useless, their training meaningless, their sacrifice pointless. Kakarot moved through them like a force of nature, but with the calculated precision of a master strategist. As the sun set on that first day of true horror, Kakarot stood atop a mountain peak and surveyed the devastation he had wrought. The fires burning in the valley below were not accidents or collateral damage, but carefully planned psychological attacks designed to spread fear across the entire planet. He had sent a message that would soon reach every government on Earth: your weapons cannot stop me, your armies cannot contain me, and your hope is already dead. The most chilling aspect of his expression was not anger or madness, but satisfaction. This was not a child throwing a tantrum or a beast following instinct. This was a professional evaluating the success of his first day's work and finding it acceptable. The real campaign had not even begun. But there was something else in his eyes as he gazed out over the burning landscape. A hunger that went beyond simple destruction, a yearning that transcended mere conquest. Deep within his consciousness, buried beneath layers of Saiyan programming and tactical calculations, was a need that even he did not fully understand. He was waiting for something, someone, a worthy opponent who could push him beyond his current limits, a challenge that would unlock the next level of his power. The slaughter of humans was merely practice, preparation for a battle that his Saiyan instincts told him was coming. In the distance, space itself seemed to shimmer with anticipation, as if the universe itself knew that this was only the beginning. The child who should have become Earth's greatest protector had instead become its perfect destroyer. And now, with Gohan's blood still fresh on his hands, Kakarot began to smile. The first cliffhanger strikes like a thunderbolt. As young Kakarot stands over Gohan's broken body, his power level suddenly spikes beyond anything recorded in Saiyan history. The child's eyes glow with golden light for the first time, and his hair flickers between black and blonde. But this is not the transformation of hope we know from the canonical timeline. This is something far more terrifying. Kakarot has achieved Super Saiyan not through the loss of someone he loved, but through the pure joy of his first kill. And as his power reaches impossible heights, a communication device in his his crash pod begins to beep with an incoming transmission from deep space. Prince Vegeta has detected the energy surge, and he is very interested in what his low-class subject has accomplished. The golden aura faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving young Kakarot standing in the moonlight with a power that should have been impossible for someone his age. The transformation had lasted only seconds, but its implications were staggering. A low-class Saiyan infant had achieved Super Saiyan through pure malice, something that even Prince Vegeta, with all his royal bloodline and training, had yet to accomplish. The communication device in his crash pod continued its urgent beeping. Across the cosmos, Vegeta's scouter had registered a power level spike that defied all known measurements. The Prince of Saiyan sat bolt upright in his recovery pod aboard Frieza's ship, his eyes wide with disbelief. According to his instruments, the energy surge had come from Earth, the backwater planet where he had sent that low-class warrior's brat years ago. But that was impossible. Kakarot was supposed to be a weakling, the offspring of a third-rate fighter who had died with the rest of planet Vegeta. There was no way such pathetic bloodline could produce power readings that exceeded even elite Saiyan warriors, yet the evidence was undeniable. Something on Earth had awakened, and it was growing stronger by the hour. Back on Earth, Kakarot had already begun the next phase of his mission. The death of Gohan had been merely the opening move in a campaign that would reshape the planet. The child moved through the mountain wilderness with purpose, his enhanced senses guiding him toward the nearest human settlement. His tactical mind had already formulated a plan that would maximize terror while gathering intelligence about his new hunting ground. The village of Maple Creek had no idea what was approaching. The small farming community nestled in the valley below had lived in peaceful isolation for generations. Their greatest concerns were crop yields and weather patterns, not the possibility that a cosmic destroyer was descending upon them with the cold efficiency of a natural disaster. Kakarot's arrival was announced not by dramatic proclamations or theatrical displays of power, but by the simple cessation of all electronic devices in the area. His ki naturally interfered with human technology, creating an electromagnetic dead zone that cut the village off from the outside world. No phones, no radios, no way to call for help or warn others of what was coming. The first casualties were the village's domestic animals. Dogs stopped barking mid-howl, their survival instincts overwhelmed by the primal terror radiating from the approaching Saiyan. Horses broke free from their stables and fled into the wilderness, driven by an evolutionary fear older than consciousness. Even the insects fell silent, leaving an unnatural quiet that made the night feel like a tomb. When Kakarot finally revealed himself walking calmly down the main street of Maple Creek, the few humans who witnessed his approach were struck by the sheer wrongness of the sight. Here was a child, barely old enough to walk properly, strolling through their community as if he owned it. But there was nothing innocent about his posture or expression. His eyes held the cold calculation of a predator evaluating prey. The village's self-appointed leader, a man named Thomas Crane, approached the strange child with the same misguided compassion that had doomed Gohan. He knelt down to the boy's level, speaking in gentle tones, asking if he was lost or needed help. Kakarot's response was to grab the man's throat with one small hand and lift him effortlessly into the air. Thomas's death was swift but public, designed to establish dominance and spread fear. The other villagers who witnessed the impossible sight of a child casually snapping a grown man's neck were paralyzed by the cognitive dissonance. Their minds simply could not process what they were seeing, leaving them vulnerable to what came next. Kakarot spent the next several hours conducting what he would later remember as his first comprehensive study of human psychology. He did not simply kill indiscriminately, but instead experimented with different approaches to understand how terror affected their decision-making processes. Some humans froze when confronted with overwhelming power. Others fled in panic, and a few tried desperately to fight back despite their obvious disadvantage. Each reaction taught him something valuable about his new prey. The fighters lasted longest but provided the most useful information about human combat techniques. The runners helped him understand the limits of human speed and endurance. The ones who froze were disappointing from a tactical standpoint but served as excellent psychological weapons against the others. By dawn, Maple Creek no longer existed as a functioning community. The buildings remained intact, but empty. The survivors had been allowed to escape, but only after witnessing enough horror to ensure they would spread word of what they had encountered. Kakarot understood that fear was a weapon far more powerful than any energy blast, and he intended to use it to maximum effect. The refugees from Maple Creek reached the nearest city within hours, their wild stories initially dismissed as trauma-induced hallucinations. But when rescue teams arrived at the village and found the evidence of what had occurred, the reports could no longer be ignored. The physical evidence was undeniable. Massive craters where energy blasts had struck, buildings crushed by impossible force, and bodies bearing injuries that no human could have inflicted. Government response was swift but woefully inadequate. Military units were dispatched to the region with orders to locate and contain what officials assumed was some kind of escaped experimental weapon. The idea that a single child could be responsible for such devastation was too absurd to consider seriously. The first military engagement took place in the hills outside Maple Creek, where Kakarot had established what could generously be called a base of operations. The young Saiyan had spent the morning analyzing the tactical advantages of different terrain features, turning the natural landscape into a strategic asset for future battles. When the soldiers arrived, they found their target exactly where intelligence reports had predicted, a small figure sitting calmly on a boulder, apparently unarmed and completely unthreatened by the approaching force. The unit commander, a veteran of numerous conflicts, had expected to find either a sophisticated weapons platform or evidence of some kind of elaborate hoax. Instead, he found himself face to face with a child who radiated menace like heat from a furnace. Even through their tactical gear and combat conditioning, the soldiers could feel the wrongness emanating from their target. This was not a lost child or a victim of circumstances, but something fundamentally alien and hostile. The battle that followed redefined military understanding of what was possible in combat. Kakarot moved through the soldiers like liquid death, his speed making their weapons useless and his power making their armor meaningless. But this was not a berserker's charge or a mindless rampage. Every move was calculated, every technique designed to gather maximum intelligence about human military capabilities. He tested their reaction times, evaluated their equipment, analyzed their communication protocols. When their bullets proved ineffective, he allowed them to call for heavier weapons. When their explosives failed to harm him, he permitted them to request air support. Each escalation taught him more about human military doctrine and revealed new weaknesses to exploit. The engagement lasted exactly as long as Kakarot wanted it to. When he had learned everything useful from the encounter, he ended it with brutal efficiency. The survivors were left alive deliberately. Their testimony needed to spread fear through the military hierarchy and encourage even more desperate responses. Word of the disaster reached the highest levels of government within hours. Emergency sessions were called, classified protocols activated, and contingency plans that had never been intended for actual use were suddenly brought out of storage. For the first time in human history, world leaders were forced to confront the possibility that their species was not alone in the universe and that they were woefully unprepared for what that meant. But Kakarot was already moving to the next phase of his campaign. The military response had been educational but ultimately disappointing. Human weapons technology was centuries behind Saiyan capabilities, their tactics predictable, their resolve fragile. A direct conquest would be trivially easy, but that was not his goal. He wanted Earth's defenders to become stronger, to push themselves beyond their normal limits, to provide him with the challenge his Saiyan blood craved. The systematic destruction of their military forces would serve as motivation for them to develop new weapons, new strategies, new levels of desperation that might finally give him the battle he was seeking. As night fell on his second day on Earth, Kakarot stood atop a mountain peak and contemplated his next move. The communication device in his pod was still beeping intermittently, its signal growing stronger. Somewhere in space, Prince Vegeta was beginning to take notice of events on this backwater planet. The thought filled him with anticipation rather than concern. Soon, he would have opponents worthy of his growing power. Soon, the real war would begin. 3 months had passed since the destruction of Maple Creek, and Earth had become an entirely different world. The initial shock of discovering they were not alone in the universe had given way to a grimmer reality. They were being systematically hunted by something that viewed their entire species as nothing more than training material. Kakarot had grown both physically and tactically during this time. His power level continued to surge with each battle, but more importantly, his understanding of human psychology and military doctrine had evolved to terrifying levels of sophistication. The child who had once simply destroyed for the joy of it now orchestrated campaigns of terror with the precision of a master strategist. His latest target was the military installation at Fort Harrison, one of the most heavily defended positions in North America. Unlike his previous attacks, this would not be a direct assault, but a carefully planned infiltration designed to test humanity's most advanced defensive systems. Kakarot had spent weeks studying satellite footage, intercepting communications, and analyzing patrol patterns. The attack began not with energy blasts or physical destruction, but with the complete failure of every electronic system within a 50-mile radius. Kakarot had learned to modulate his ki output to create precise electromagnetic pulses, turning his natural aura into a weapon that could cripple modern technology without alerting his enemies to his exact location. In the command bunker deep beneath Fort Harrison, General Morrison watched his screens go dark one by one. The veteran officer had overseen military operations on 6 continents, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for an enemy that could render their most sophisticated equipment useless simply by existing in the same area. The base's emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing blast doors and switching to hardened backup systems. For a few minutes, it seemed as though they might be able to maintain some level of operational capability. Then the screaming started from the outer perimeter. Kakarot moved through the base's defenses like a surgeon dissecting a patient. Each guard post, each weapon's emplacement, each supposedly impregnable barrier was neutralized with clinical precision. But he did not simply kill the soldiers he encountered. Instead, he studied their training, their equipment, their tactics, learning everything he could about human military doctrine. The soldiers who survived these encounters were left with injuries that would heal, but memories that would haunt them forever. They spoke of a child who moved faster than their eyes could follow, who could deflect armor-piercing rounds with his bare hands, who seemed to know their every move before they made it. Most disturbing of all was his apparent lack of anger or hatred. He fought with the detached professionalism of someone conducting a scientific experiment. In the command bunker, General Morrison made a decision that would echo through military history. Rather than attempt another futile defense, he activated the base's self-destruct sequence. If they could not stop this creature, they could at least deny it the satisfaction of a complete victory and prevent it from accessing their classified research. Kakarot sensed the building energy of the nuclear device long before it reached critical mass. His enhanced perception could detect the subtle changes in electromagnetic fields, the rising temperature signatures, the unique energy patterns of human atomic weapons. Rather than flee, he remained at the center of the blast radius, curious to experience the full force of humanity's most devastating weapon. The explosion that followed was visible from space, a miniature sun blooming in the desert landscape. Satellite monitoring stations around the world registered the detonation, and for a brief moment, government officials dared to hope that their enemy had finally been eliminated. The hope died when their instruments detected a single life sign walking calmly out of the nuclear crater. Kakarot emerged from the devastation completely unharmed, his clothes vaporized, but his body unmarked by forces that should have reduced him to component atoms. He had not only survived humanity's ultimate weapon, but had learned valuable information about their atomic technology. The psychological impact of this revelation cannot be overstated. In bunkers and command centers around the world, military leaders came to the terrible realization that their enemy was beyond the reach of conventional warfare. Nuclear weapons, humanity's final deterrent, were apparently no more effective than harsh language against this cosmic destroyer. But the ripple effects of Kakarot's campaign extended far beyond military installations. In the scientific community, researchers who had spent their careers studying theoretical physics found themselves frantically trying to understand how a single being could possess energy outputs that exceeded small stars. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a leading expert in exotic matter research, had her entire worldview shattered when she analyzed energy readings from Kakarot's battles. Her calculations showed that the child's power source operated on principles that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The energy he generated should have required the mass energy conversion of substantial amounts of matter, yet he showed no signs of consuming fuel or drawing power from external sources. It was as if he had learned to tap into the zero-point energy field itself, accessing the infinite potential that existed in the quantum vacuum. Meanwhile, Dr. Gero's secret laboratory had become a hive of desperate activity. The brilliant scientist had originally begun his android project as a weapon against the Red Ribbon Army's enemies, but Kakarot's appearance had shifted his priorities entirely. His hatred for the Saiyan destroyer now drove innovations that were years ahead of their normal timeline. Android 16's development had accelerated dramatically, incorporating technology that Dr. Gero had only theorized about before encountering Kakarot's power. The artificial being's design specifications called for energy absorption capabilities, adaptive combat algorithms, and most importantly, a power source that could potentially match or exceed Saiyan energy output. But perhaps the most unexpected beneficiary of this New World Order was Master Roshi's former student, a young monk named Krillin. In the canonical timeline, Krillin had trained under the Turtle Hermit as part of his journey toward becoming a martial artist. Now, with Master Roshi forced into hiding and traditional martial arts seemingly useless against cosmic-level threats, Krillin had become something entirely different. He led a cell of resistance fighters who had learned to hide their life force signatures through meditation techniques borrowed from various spiritual traditions. Their guerrilla tactics were based not on direct confrontation, which was obviously suicidal, but on gathering intelligence and developing countermeasures for future use. The resistance had established a network of underground shelters connected by tunnels that ran for hundreds of miles beneath major population centers. These refuges were powered by geothermal energy and shielded by electromagnetic barriers designed to mask human life signs from Saiyan scouters. In one such shelter beneath the ruins of West City, Yamcha had undergone a transformation that mirrored the changed world above. The former desert bandit had developed new techniques specifically designed for fighting opponents with overwhelming power advantages. His Wolf Fang Fist had evolved into something called the Phantom Wolf technique, a series of attacks that emphasized speed and precision over raw force. The philosophy behind these new fighting styles was revolutionary. Since they could not match Kakarot's power directly, human fighters had learned to exploit the few weaknesses their enemy possessed. Saiyan pride, their tendency to become overconfident, their desire for challenging battles, all of these traits could potentially be used against them. Tien, another martial artist whose life had been completely altered by this timeline, had taken a different approach. He had retreated to the mountains and begun developing techniques that pushed his body beyond all normal limits. His training regimen was so intense that it was slowly killing him, but he persisted in the hope that human willpower could somehow transcend the biological limitations of their species. His new technique, which he called the Life Force Cannon, converted his actual life energy into destructive power. It was a one-shot weapon that would kill him in the process of using it, but preliminary calculations suggested it might actually be capable of harming a Saiyan. The technique represented humanity's ultimate expression of desperate determination, the willingness to sacrifice everything for even a chance at victory. But while Earth's defenders struggled to develop new ways of fighting an impossible enemy, Kakarot himself was undergoing his own evolution. His battles with increasingly sophisticated human opposition had taught him something unexpected about the nature of power. Raw strength alone was not enough to achieve true mastery. He needed opponents who could challenge him intellectually as well as physically. His training regimen had evolved to include not just physical conditioning but tactical analysis, strategic planning, and even psychological study. He had begun reading human military histories, learning about great commanders and brilliant strategies. Sun Tzu's Art of War fascinated him, not for its philosophical insights but for its practical applications in warfare. The irony was not lost on him that he was learning strategy from the same species he was systematically exterminating, but Kakarot had no capacity for appreciating irony, only for recognizing useful information regardless of its source. His power development during this period was extraordinary even by Saiyan standards. He had learned to maintain a constant low-level Super Saiyan transformation, his hair flickering between black and gold as his energy output fluctuated with his emotional state. More importantly, he had begun to understand the relationship between mental state and physical power that would eventually lead to higher transformation levels. The communication device in his pod had been receiving increasingly frequent transmissions from deep space. Prince Vegeta's interest in Earth had grown from mild curiosity to active investigation. The power readings his scouters detected from this backwater planet suggested that something unprecedented was occurring, something that might threaten the established order of the universe. But there was another development that even Kakarot did not fully understand. His systematic destruction of human civilization had begun to attract attention from other cosmic entities. The Galactic Patrol had received reports of an unknown energy signature engaged in planetary conquest. Frieza's intelligence network had detected unusual activity in a previously insignificant solar system. Most ominously, the Supreme Kai had sensed a disturbance in the cosmic balance that suggested the emergence of a new source of destruction. The divine being's ability to perceive threats to universal stability had been triggered by something occurring on a small planet in the Outer Rim territories. As Kakarot stood atop the ruins of Fort Harrison, watching the radiation-scarred landscape stretch out beneath him, he felt a familiar stirring of anticipation. His scouter, salvaged from his pod and modified with human technology, was detecting multiple high-power signatures approaching Earth's solar system. The first was immediately recognizable, Prince Vegeta's energy pattern, accompanied by what appeared to be Nappa's signature. But there were others, unknown quantities that might represent new challenges or new opportunities. The child who had once been content to hunt humans now yearned for battles that would push him to new levels of power. The systematic destruction of Earth's military forces had served its purpose as training, but he was ready for opponents who could match his growing strength. His tactical analysis of Earth's remaining defenses suggested that the planet's organized resistance would collapse within another 6 months. After that, he would need to find new sources of challenge or risk stagnating in his development. The approaching energy signatures might provide exactly what he was looking for. The universe was about to discover what happened when a perfect Saiyan weapon encountered forces that could match its hunger for battle. The real war was finally about to begin. The impossible had become reality in the underground resistance headquarters beneath New Tokyo. Former enemies sat around the same table, their ancient rivalries forgotten in the face of a threat that dwarfed their previous conflicts. Master Roshi, his normally cheerful demeanor replaced by grim determination, studied tactical reports alongside King Piccolo, the Demon King, whose very presence should have triggered immediate warfare. The alliance between the Turtle School and the forces of darkness represented a fundamental shift in Earth's power dynamics. Piccolo's spawned children, beings created for conquest and destruction, now served as scouts and intelligence gatherers for the human resistance. Their demonic nature allowed them to operate in areas too dangerous for human infiltrators, their evil hearts paradoxically making them ideal allies against a greater evil. Yamcha entered the command chamber carrying reports from the latest reconnaissance mission, his desert bandit's instincts now serving a cause he never could have imagined. The wolf-fang technique he had perfected for robbery and survival had been adapted into something called the pack hunter formation, designed specifically for coordinated strikes against opponents with overwhelming individual power. The transformation in these fighters was remarkable not just in their techniques but in their fundamental philosophies. Yamcha, who had once been motivated by simple greed and the desire for an easy life, now spent 18 hours a day training with an intensity that would have killed lesser men. His body bore the scars of countless sparring sessions against Piccolo's demon spawn, each wound a lesson in fighting beings stronger than himself. Tien sat in meditative silence in the corner of the chamber, his third eye focused on energy patterns that normal vision could not perceive. His training had become so extreme that his body existed in a constant state of barely controlled self-destruction. The techniques he was developing required him to burn his own life force as fuel, trading longevity for the power to potentially harm a Saiyan. The philosophical implications of their situation were staggering. These warriors, who had spent their lives pursuing strength through discipline and honor, now found themselves developing techniques based on desperation and sacrifice. The pure martial arts that had defined their identities were being corrupted by necessity into something darker and more desperate. Krillin's voice cut through the tension as he delivered his latest intelligence report. His reconnaissance teams had confirmed what they all feared. Kakarot's power was still growing at an exponential rate. More disturbing still, his tactical sophistication had evolved to the point where he was no longer simply destroying targets but conducting what could only be described as scientific experiments on human military doctrine. The pattern of his attacks had become predictable in its unpredictability. He would appear at a military installation, disable their technology, engage their forces long enough to analyze their capabilities, then withdraw before they could adapt to his tactics. Each encounter taught him something new about human warfare while revealing nothing about his own limitations. But there was something else in Krillin's report that made the assembled fighters exchange glances of barely concealed terror. Kakarot's recent attacks had included attempts to communicate with his targets before killing them. Not threats or demands for surrender, but questions about human culture, military history, and most disturbing of all, their emotional responses to loss and fear. The child was studying them not just as opponents but as specimens. His intellectual curiosity about human psychology had begun to manifest in ways that transformed simple battles into prolonged psychological torture sessions. Survivors reported being forced to watch their comrades die while Kakarot analyzed their reactions, taking notes on how different stimuli affected human performance under stress. This development had pushed the resistance leadership to make a decision that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. They were going to attempt direct contact with King Piccolo, not through his spawn, but with the Demon King himself. The risks were enormous, but their need for allies with cosmic-level power had become desperate enough to justify almost any gamble. The meeting took place in the ruins of what had once been the World Martial Arts Tournament grounds. The irony was bitter. A place that had once celebrated the pinnacle of human martial achievement was now the site of a desperate alliance between former enemies. Piccolo materialized from the shadows, his cape billowing in winds that seemed to respond to his malevolent presence. Master Roshi stepped forward, his age frame belying the power that still resided within him. The Turtle Hermit had trained warriors for centuries, but never in his long life had he faced a situation that required him to ally with the very forces he had spent decades fighting. The words that passed between them were few, but their implications were enormous. Piccolo's response was immediate and shocking. The Demon King, whose pride had once driven him to attempt world conquest, now admitted that Kakarot represented a threat beyond his ability to handle alone. The child's power had grown to levels that made even Piccolo's demonic strength seem insignificant by comparison. But there was something else in Piccolo's demeanor that surprised the human fighters. Fear. Not the tactical concern of a warrior facing a stronger opponent, but genuine terror at what Kakarot represented. Piccolo had spent his existence as Earth's greatest evil, but now he found himself confronted by something that made his own malevolence seem like childish mischief. The alliance was formalized not through treaties or formal agreements, but through a simple exchange of techniques. Piccolo taught the human fighters advanced energy manipulation methods that had been developed in the demon realm over millennia. In return, they shared their newly developed anti-Saiyan tactics and the intelligence they had gathered about Kakarot's capabilities. The first joint training session between humans and demons was surreal beyond description. Yamcha sparred with Piccolo's spawn while Master Roshi instructed demonic entities in the principles of ki control. Tien worked alongside creatures of pure evil to develop combination attacks that neither species could have conceived alone. But the most shocking development came when they attempted their first coordinated strike against one of Kakarot's suspected hideouts. The assault team consisted of Yamcha, Tien, three of Piccolo's strongest spawn, and a squad of human resistance fighters armed with experimental weapons developed by Dr. Gero's research network. The target was a mountain cave system where satellite imagery had detected energy signatures consistent with Kakarot's presence. The plan was simple: surround the area, coordinate their attacks to prevent escape, and hopefully catch the young Saiyan in a situation where even his overwhelming power could be momentarily neutralized by tactical superiority. The mission went wrong from the first moment. Kakarot had not only detected their approach, but had been waiting for them with what could only be described as anticipation. He emerged from the cave system not in a defensive posture, but with the relaxed confidence of someone who had finally found entertainment worthy of his attention. The battle that followed redefined everyone's understanding of what was possible in combat. Kakarot moved through their coordinated attacks like a conductor directing an orchestra, his responses perfectly timed to counter each technique before it could reach maximum effectiveness. He fought not just their individual abilities but their teamwork itself, disrupting their coordination through precisely targeted strikes that left each fighter isolated and vulnerable. Yamcha's Pack Hunter formation, designed to overwhelm single opponents through coordinated strikes from multiple angles, was dissected with surgical precision. Kakarot identified the timing patterns that made the technique effective and exploited the brief moments of vulnerability that occurred during transition phases. Tien's life force techniques, which should have been impossible to predict or counter, were neutralized through tactics that demonstrated an understanding of human physiology that bordered on medical expertise. Kakarot had apparently studied the energy flow patterns that governed human ki manipulation and learned to disrupt them at the source. Most shocking of all was his response to Piccolo's demon spawn. These creatures, born from pure evil and designed for destruction, found themselves outmatched not just in power but in cruelty. Kakarot's attacks on them were calculated to cause maximum psychological damage, turning their own malevolent nature against them through techniques that seemed to feed on their evil intent. The fight ended not with their defeat, but with their dismissal. Kakarot simply stopped engaging them and walked away, his posture conveying boredom rather than victory. He had learned what he wanted from the encounter and no longer found them worthy of his attention. The survivors of that engagement returned to their hideout fundamentally changed. They had not just been defeated, but analyzed, cataloged, and found wanting. The realization that their enemy viewed them as nothing more than test subjects for his evolving combat doctrine was more devastating than any physical injury. But there was one final revelation that emerged from the debriefing of that failed mission. In the closing moments of the battle, as Kakarot prepared to leave, Tien's third eye had caught a glimpse of something that defied explanation. For just an instant, the young Saiyan's expression had changed, showing not satisfaction or boredom, but something that might have been loneliness. The implications of this observation would haunt the resistance fighters for weeks to come. Was it possible that beneath his perfect warrior conditioning, some trace of the child Kakarot might have been still existed? And if so, could that vulnerability be exploited, or would attempting to reach it only make him more dangerous than ever? The answer to that question would determine not just their survival, but the fate of every living thing on Earth. The energy readings were unlike anything recorded in Earth's history. Deep space monitoring stations detected massive power signatures approaching the solar system at speeds that defied conventional physics. Two distinct energy patterns dominated the incoming threat, but there were others, smaller signatures that suggested an entire fleet of unknown vessels following in their wake. In the underground command center beneath Mount Paozu, ironically located near where Grandpa Gohan had once lived, the resistance leadership gathered for what they all knew might be their final strategic meeting. The irony of their location was not lost on Master Roshi, who remembered the gentle hermit whose death had set this nightmare in motion. Kakarot had detected the approaching signatures days before Earth's primitive technology could register them. His response had been immediate and telling. Rather than prepare defensive positions or attempt to hide, he had begun the most intensive training regimen of his young life. The child who had grown bored with Earth's military forces now radiated an excitement that was terrifying to witness. Dr. Gero's emergency communication reached the resistance through channels that had taken months to establish. His message was brief but devastating. Android 16 was only 60% complete, and the approaching energy signatures suggested they were out of time. The artificial warrior designed to match Saiyan power levels would not be ready for the coming battle. But Gero had other news that changed everything. His deep space sensors had identified the lead signatures as belonging to Prince Vegeta and his companion Nappa. More importantly, his analysis of their energy patterns revealed something that filled even the hardened scientists with dread. They were not coming to stop Kakarot, but to join him. The implications hit the Resistance leadership like a physical blow. Earth's defenders had been barely able to survive against a single Saiyan child. Now they faced the prospect of 3 adult Saiyan warriors working in coordination, their combined power potentially capable of destroying the planet itself. Yamcha's latest reconnaissance report confirmed their worst fears. Kakarot had abandoned all pretense of hiding his activities and was now openly preparing for the arrival of his fellow Saiyans. He had cleared a massive area in what had once been the Western Desert, creating what could only be described as a landing zone fit for royalty. The young Saiyan's behavior during this preparation phase revealed aspects of his personality that the Resistance had never witnessed before. For the first time since his arrival on Earth, Kakarot seemed genuinely happy, not the cold satisfaction of a successful hunt, but actual joy at the prospect of meeting others of his kind. Tien's observation teams reported that Kakarot spent hours each day staring at the sky, his enhanced senses tracking the approaching vessels long before they became visible. His power level fluctuated wildly during these vigils, spiking with excitement before settling back to levels that were still growing stronger by the day. But there was something else in his preparation that suggested a level of strategic thinking that went beyond simple anticipation. Kakarot had begun modifying the landing zone with what appeared to be defensive installations, though their purpose was unclear. Energy readings suggested he was creating some kind of amplification network that could enhance Saiyan power levels beyond their natural limits. The Resistance's attempts to sabotage these preparations had proved futile. Every strike team sent to disrupt Kakarot's work had been detected and eliminated with an efficiency that suggested he was no longer even considering humans a credible threat. Their attacks were swatted aside like insects, barely registering on his attention. King Piccolo's demonic intelligence network provided the most disturbing revelation of all. Kakarot had been communicating with the approaching Saiyans using technology salvaged from his original pod. The transmissions were encrypted, but their frequency and duration suggested extensive planning for whatever was to come. Master Roshi made the decision that would define Earth's final desperate gambit. If they could not stop the Saiyan reunion, they would attempt to turn it to their advantage. The plan was audacious beyond reason. They would try to exploit the hierarchical nature of Saiyan society to create conflict between Kakarot and Prince Vegeta. The strategy required them to understand Saiyan psychology better than any human had ever needed to before. Krillin's intelligence teams had analyzed every recorded interaction between Saiyans, studying Vegeta's previous visits to other worlds and attempting to construct a psychological profile of the Saiyan prince. What they discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. Vegeta's pride was legendary even among his own people, his need to be acknowledged as the ultimate warrior driving every aspect of his behavior. The prospect of a low-class Saiyan achieving power levels that exceeded his own would be psychologically devastating to someone whose entire identity was built on genetic superiority. But Kakarot represented something even more threatening to Vegeta's worldview. Proof that Saiyan strength could be achieved through methods other than royal breeding and elite training. The child had grown powerful through constant battle and tactical analysis, not through the traditional Saiyan paths to strength. The Resistance began implementing a plan that was part psychological warfare, part desperate deception. They would attempt to manipulate the first meeting between Kakarot and Vegeta, feeding the prince information designed to highlight his subordinate's achievements while subtly undermining his own sense of superiority. Yamcha volunteered for the most dangerous aspect of the operation, direct contact with Prince Vegeta upon his arrival. The plan required someone to survive long enough to deliver carefully crafted messages designed to inflame Vegeta's pride and create tension between the Saiyans. Tien's role was even more suicidal. He would attempt to use his life force techniques during the critical moments of the Saiyan reunion, not to attack them directly, but to create energy disruptions that might interfere with their ability to coordinate their powers effectively. But as the Resistance finalized their desperate plans, Kakarot's own preparations reached a crescendo that revealed the true scope of his intelligence. The landing zone he had created was not simply a welcoming area for his fellow Saiyans, but a sophisticated testing ground designed to evaluate their capabilities and establish the power hierarchy between them. The amplification network he had constructed would not just enhance Saiyan power levels, but monitor them in real time, providing detailed analysis of each warrior's strengths and weaknesses. Kakarot had spent months preparing not just for a reunion, but for a comprehensive evaluation of where he stood in relation to his fellow Saiyans. His tactical mind had already anticipated the possibility of conflict with Vegeta. The defensive installations hidden throughout the landing zone were not meant to protect against human attacks, but to provide strategic advantages in a potential battle between Saiyan elites. The depth of his planning became clear when resistance reconnaissance teams discovered training facilities hidden in mountain caves throughout the region. Kakarot had been preparing for every possible scenario, from cooperative training with his fellow Saiyans to all-out warfare if their reunion went badly. His power development during this period had reached levels that defied measurement by human instruments. The child who had once struggled to maintain Super Saiyan transformation for more than a few minutes could now sustain it indefinitely, his hair flickering between gold and black as his energy output fluctuated with his emotional state. But perhaps most disturbing of all was the change in his demeanor as the approaching vessels drew closer. The cold efficiency that had characterized his previous battles was being replaced by something that resembled anticipation, even eagerness. For the first time in his life, Kakarot would be meeting others who might actually understand him. The Resistance's final intelligence briefing painted a picture of approaching doom that surpassed their worst nightmares. The energy signatures suggested that Prince Vegeta had brought not just Nappa but additional Saiyan technology that could potentially transform Earth into a forward base for galactic conquest. Satellite imagery showed massive energy discharges in the outer solar system as the approaching vessels tested their weapons systems. The power levels involved in these tests exceeded anything Earth's military had ever recorded, suggesting that the visitors possessed the capability to destroy the planet multiple times over. As the final hours approached, an unexpected development changed everything they thought they understood about the situation. Kakarot's power level suddenly spiked to readings that broke every instrument trying to measure it. The child was achieving a transformation that went beyond Super Saiyan, his energy output climbing to levels that threatened to destabilize the planet's magnetic field. But this was not a transformation driven by rage or desperation as it would have been in the canonical timeline. This was calculated, controlled, deliberate. Kakarot was demonstrating his strength, not just to welcome his fellow Saiyans, but to establish his position in their hierarchy before they even arrived. The message was clear. The low-class warrior who had been sent to conquer Earth had evolved into something that even Saiyan royalty would have to respect. The reunion would not be between a prince and his subordinate, but between equals who had achieved power through different paths. As the first Saiyan vessels appeared as points of light in Earth's sky, Kakarot stood in his prepared landing zone and smiled. For the first time since Grandpa Gohan's death, he was about to meet beings who might actually be worthy opponents. The Resistance could only watch in horror as three of the universe's most powerful warriors prepared to meet on their world. Whatever emerged from this reunion would determine not just Earth's fate, but the balance of power in the entire galaxy. Then the impossible happened. As Prince Vegeta's ship descended toward the landing zone, Kakarot's scouter detected additional energy signatures approaching from a completely different direction. Someone else was coming to Earth, someone whose power level made even the Saiyan prince seem insignificant by comparison. The gathering storm was about to become a cosmic hurricane that would reshape the universe itself, and at its center stood a child who had never learned the meaning of mercy, waiting to discover just how far his strength could take him. The sky split apart as Prince Vegeta's spherical ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its alien hull gleaming with an otherworldly malevolence that made the very air around it crackle with energy. Behind it came Nappa's larger vessel, its cargo bay doors already beginning to open to reveal additional Saiyan technology that humanity had never imagined could exist. Kakarot stood motionless in the center of his prepared landing zone, his power level fluctuating wildly as emotions he had never experienced coursed through his consciousness. This was not the cold anticipation of battle he had felt when facing human opponents, but something deeper and more complex. For the first time in his existence, he was about to meet others who shared his heritage, his power, and his understanding of what it meant to be Saiyan. The prince's ship touched down with surprising gentleness, its landing systems engaging automatically to prevent any damage to the surrounding area. This was not the arrival of a conqueror, but of royalty expecting to be properly received. The hatch opened with a hiss of escaping atmosphere, and Prince Vegeta stepped onto Earth's soil for the first time. The Saiyan prince was everything the legends had claimed and more. His presence radiated authority and barely contained violence, his every movement precise and calculated. But what struck Kakarot most powerfully was the recognition that passed between them. Here was another being who understood power not as a tool for achieving goals, but as an end in itself. Vegeta's first words were not a greeting but an evaluation. His scouter had been analyzing Kakarot's energy output during the descent, and the readings were beyond anything he had expected from a low-class warrior. The child standing before him possessed power levels that rivaled Saiyan elites, achieved through methods that challenged everything Vegeta understood about their species' hierarchy. But there was something else in Vegeta's expression that Kakarot found fascinating, genuine surprise. The prince had come to Earth expecting to find either a conquered planet or a dead subordinate. Instead, he discovered a world in the process of systematic subjugation and a fellow Saiyan who had evolved far beyond his original programming. Nappa's arrival shifted the dynamic immediately. The massive Saiyan emerged from his vessel like a force of nature, his bulk and obvious physical power making him an intimidating presence even by Saiyan standards. But his deference to Vegeta was absolute, his every action reinforcing the rigid hierarchy that governed Saiyan society. The three Saiyans formed a triangle in the center of the landing zone, each evaluating the others through senses that could detect power levels, fighting experience, and psychological state with precision that exceeded any technological scanner. The tension between them was electric, not the hostility of enemies, but the competitive awareness of apex predators meeting for the first time. Vegeta's first test was subtle but unmistakable. He released a controlled burst of his ki, allowing his power level to spike to levels that would have been impressive even by elite Saiyan standards. It was a display designed to establish dominance, to remind the low-class warrior of his place in the natural order. Kakarot's response was immediate and shocking. His own power level surged to match Vegeta's display, then exceeded it by a significant margin. But this was not a reckless demonstration of strength. Every aspect of his energy release was controlled, calculated, designed to convey respect for Vegeta's rank while making it clear that power alone would not determine their relationship. The psychological impact on Vegeta was visible even through his practiced composure. The prince had built his entire identity around the assumption of his natural superiority over other Saiyans. The existence of a low-class warrior who could match or exceed his power challenged fundamental beliefs about genetics, training, and the divine right of Saiyan royalty. Nappa's reaction was less complex but equally significant. The giant Saiyan's loyalty to Vegeta was absolute, but his warrior instincts recognized strength regardless of its source. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly, acknowledging Kakarot as a peer rather than a subordinate. The conversation that followed would have been incomprehensible to human observers, not because of language barriers, but because of the concepts being discussed. The three Saiyans spoke of power levels, conquest strategies, and battle experiences with the casual familiarity of professionals in the same field. Kakarot's account of his Earth campaign impressed even Vegeta's cynical sensibilities. The systematic nature of his conquest, the strategic thinking behind his attacks, and most importantly, the exponential growth in his power levels demonstrated a level of tactical sophistication that rivaled Saiyan military doctrine. But it was Vegeta's revelation about the mysterious third energy signature that transformed the entire dynamic of their meeting. The approaching power belonged to someone who had been tracking Saiyan energy signatures across the galaxy, someone whose interest in their activities could only mean trouble for all of them. The identity of this approaching threat was something that made even Prince Vegeta's expression grow serious. Frieza's elite forces had detected the energy disturbances from Earth and dispatched an advanced scout to investigate. The being approaching their world was Captain Ginyu, leader of Frieza's most feared Special Forces unit. This revelation changed everything about the Saiyans' reunion. What had begun as a meeting between a prince and his subjects now became a war council between allies facing a common threat. Frieza's interest in Earth could only mean one thing: their activities had attracted the attention of the most powerful being in the known universe. Vegeta's strategic mind immediately grasped the implications. If Frieza learned that Saiyans were developing power levels that could potentially threaten his dominance, he would not hesitate to destroy them all. The tyrant's paranoia about Saiyan potential was legendary, and he had already demonstrated his willingness to commit genocide to eliminate perceived threats. The alliance that formed between the three Saiyans was born not of affection or shared ideals, but of cold, pragmatic necessity. They were the last members of their species, and their survival depended on presenting a united front against forces that sought their destruction. Kakarot's response to this new information was characteristically calculating. He had spent months preparing Earth's defenses for the arrival of his fellow Saiyans, but now those same preparations would need to be adapted for a completely different type of warfare. Fighting Captain Ginyu would require tactics and power levels beyond anything he had previously developed. The training that began immediately after this revelation was unlike anything seen in Saiyan history. Three warriors with different backgrounds and fighting styles began sharing techniques and strategies in a desperate attempt to prepare for a battle that would determine their species' survival. Vegeta's royal training had emphasized technique refinement and tactical analysis. His Gallic gun technique was demonstrated for the first time on Earth, its devastating power carving new canyons in the landscape as he showed his allies what elite Saiyan training could accomplish. Nappa's contribution was raw physical conditioning and battle-tested combat experience. His approach to fighting emphasized overwhelming force and psychological intimidation, tactics that had served him well in countless planetary conquests. But it was Kakarot's innovations that truly impressed his fellow Saiyans. His techniques had been developed through constant adaptation to new challenges, resulting in fighting methods that were uniquely suited to facing opponents with unknown capabilities. The combination attacks they developed during this intensive training period represented a fusion of Saiyan fighting doctrine that had never been attempted before. Royal technique precision combined with battle-hardened experience and innovative adaptation created fighting methods that exceeded the sum of their individual capabilities. Their energy began to resonate in harmony, creating amplification effects that multiplied their individual power levels beyond normal limits. The network Kakarot had constructed in the landing zone proved its worth, channeling and focusing their combined ki into attacks that could potentially threaten even Frieza Force elites. But their training was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Ginyu himself. The alien warrior ship appeared in Earth's atmosphere like a harbinger of doom, its sleek design radiating menace and authority. Unlike the Saiyan vessels, this was clearly built for war, its weapon systems and defensive capabilities far exceeding anything in the known galaxy. Ginyu's emergence from his vessel was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Every aspect of his appearance and demeanor was calculated to inspire fear and establish dominance. His power level, while not immediately overwhelming, carried with it the authority of Frieza's backing and the knowledge that defeat would mean facing the tyrant's personal wrath. The confrontation began not with physical combat but with diplomatic posturing that quickly devolved into threats and ultimatums. Ginyu's mission was clear: determine whether the Saiyans posed a threat to Frieza's dominance and eliminate them if necessary. Vegeta's response was a masterpiece of political maneuvering. He acknowledged Frieza's authority while subtly implying that Saiyan's strength could be an asset to the Empire rather than a threat. His words were carefully chosen to appeal to Ginyu's strategic thinking while avoiding any direct challenge to established power structures. But Kakarot's reaction was characteristically direct. He evaluated Captain Ginyu as he would any opponent, analyzing power levels, fighting stance, and psychological state with the cold efficiency of a born warrior. His conclusion was immediate and decisive. This was the strongest opponent he had ever faced, and defeating him would require everything he had learned about Saiyan combat. The battle that erupted was unlike any previous conflict on Earth. This was not a one-sided slaughter or a desperate defense, but a genuine contest between cosmic-level warriors whose power could reshape continents with their clash. Ginyu's opening attack was a display of technique that demonstrated why he led Frieza's elite forces. His speed exceeded even Saiyan reflexes, his strength was augmented by alien technology, and his fighting style incorporated methods from dozens of conquered worlds. The three Saiyans' coordinated response was equally impressive. They moved as a unit, their individual attacks timed to create openings for their allies while covering each other's weaknesses. The fusion of their different fighting styles created combination attacks that even Ginyu struggled to counter. Vegeta's Gala Gun merged with Nappa's explosive ki blasts and Kakarot's innovative energy manipulation to create a sustained assault that forced Ginyu to reveal capabilities he had kept hidden during his initial evaluation. The captain's counterattack was devastating in its precision. He identified the subtle timing patterns that made the Saiyans' coordination effective and exploited the microscopic gaps in their defense with surgical accuracy. His alien physiology allowed him to absorb and redirect energy attacks in ways that Saiyan doctrine had never encountered. But it was during this exchange that Kakarot achieved something unprecedented in Saiyan history. The intensity of battle against a truly superior opponent triggered a transformation that went beyond Super Saiyan. His power levels spiked to readings that exceeded even Ginyu's capabilities, his energy output climbing to levels that threatened the structural integrity of the planet itself. This was not the legendary Super Saiyan transformation of myth and prophecy, but something entirely new. Kakarot's innovation and adaptation had created a power state that drew on pure battle instinct and tactical analysis rather than emotional triggers. Vegeta and Nappa's response to witnessing this transformation was immediate. Their own power levels surged in sympathetic resonance, their Saiyan pride refusing to be outdone by a low-class warrior. The three of them together began generating energy outputs that registered on sensors throughout the solar system. Captain Ginyu's evaluation of the situation changed dramatically. What had begun as a routine elimination mission had become a battle for survival against opponents whose power was growing exponentially during combat. His emergency protocols activated, sending priority signals to Frieza's main fleet that Earth had become a significant threat. The final phase of their confrontation pushed all participants beyond their previous limits. Energy attacks that could destroy moons were exchanged like casual conversation. The very air around them began to ionize from the electromagnetic effects of their ki manipulation. Reality itself seemed to buckle under the strain as their power levels reached heights that approached cosmic significance. The boundary between dimensions began to waver, and observers throughout the galaxy detected gravitational anomalies emanating from Earth's solar system. As the battle reached its crescendo, something unexpected happened that would change the balance of power in the universe forever. The three Saiyans' energy began to merge and amplify in ways that transcended individual transformation. They were achieving something that Saiyan legend had spoken of but never documented: the fusion of warrior spirits into a force that could challenge even the gods themselves. The fusion of Saiyan energy had created something that defied every law of physics and challenged the fundamental structure of reality itself. Kakarot, Vegeta, and Nappa stood in perfect synchronization, their individual auras merging into a single column of golden light that stretched from Earth's surface to the edge of space. This was not the fusion dance of later legend, but something far more primal and dangerous. Captain Ginyu's expression shifted from confident superiority to genuine alarm as his scouter registered power readings that exceeded the theoretical maximum of his measurement devices. The three Saiyans before him had transcended individual limitation and achieved a state of collective power that rivaled cosmic forces. But this transformation came at a terrible cost. The strain of channeling such massive energies was burning through their life force at an exponential rate. Their bodies, even with Saiyan resilience, were beginning to show signs of critical damage from containing power levels that no mortal form was designed to handle. Kakarot felt his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of his individual existence. For the first time since Grandpa Gohan's death, he experienced something approaching empathy as Vegeta's memories of planet Vegeta's destruction flooded through their shared connection. The prince's pain at losing his homeworld, his desperate need to prove Saiyan superiority, his crushing loneliness as the last member of royalty, all of it became part of Kakarot's awareness. Vegeta experienced an equally profound revelation as Kakarot's tactical innovations and battle instincts merged with his own strategic thinking. The low-class warrior's approach to combat was unlike anything in Saiyan military doctrine, improvised and adaptive in ways that royal training had never emphasized. More disturbing still was the glimpse he received of Kakarot's emotional void, the complete absence of compassion that made his own cruelty seem almost gentle by comparison. Nappa's contribution to their fusion was raw determination and loyalty that had been forged through countless battles. His unwavering devotion to Saiyan ideals provided the emotional anchor that prevented their merged consciousness from fragmenting under the strain of containing such massive power. Captain Ginyu's response to this unprecedented development was swift and ruthless. He activated emergency protocols that would summon the entire Ginyu force to Earth, while simultaneously preparing his most devastating attack. If he could not defeat the Saiyans through conventional means, he would destroy the planet itself and claim victory through superior firepower. The battle that erupted transcended anything that had previously occurred in Earth's solar system. Energy attacks that could vaporize asteroids were exchanged with casual precision. The very fabric of space-time began to ripple and distort as forces beyond mortal comprehension clashed in desperate combat. Ginyu's alien physiology granted him advantages that pure power alone could not overcome. His ability to absorb and redirect energy attacks made him nearly immune to conventional ki-based techniques. His speed, enhanced by technology that augmented his natural reflexes, allowed him to stay ahead of even Saiyan reaction times. But the fused Saiyans possessed something that Ginyu had never encountered, the ability to adapt their fighting style in real time. Each exchange taught them something new about his capabilities while revealing nothing about their own evolving techniques. Their shared consciousness allowed them to process tactical information at speeds that exceeded individual thought. The breakthrough came when Kakarot's innovative mind merged with Vegeta's technical precision and Nappa's raw power to create an attack that existed outside normal energy manipulation. They discovered how to fold space itself around their Kai, creating projectiles that bypassed conventional defenses by striking from dimensions that physical matter could not access. Ginyu's shock at this impossible technique was visible even through his alien features. His emergency transmission to Frieza's main fleet took on new urgency as he reported that the Saiyans had developed abilities that threatened the fundamental principles upon which the Empire's military superiority was based. The dimensional attack struck Ginyu with the force of a collapsing star, but his alien physiology proved more resilient than the Saiyans had anticipated. Instead of being destroyed, he began to undergo a transformation of his own, his body absorbing the dimensional energy and using it to fuel capabilities that had remained dormant until this moment. What emerged from the energy discharge was no longer recognizable as the Captain Ginyu who had arrived on Earth. His form had become something that existed partially outside normal space-time, his attacks now capable of striking through barriers that should have been impenetrable. This was what Frieza's elite forces became when pushed beyond their normal limits. The Saiyans' fused consciousness recoiled from the implications of what they were witnessing. Ginyu's transformation suggested that Frieza's forces possessed capabilities that went far beyond anything recorded in Saiyan intelligence files. If this was what a single captain could become under extreme stress, what horrors awaited them when they faced the tyrant himself? But their shared determination refused to acknowledge defeat. Kakarot's tactical mind began analyzing Ginyu's new form for weaknesses while Vegeta's strategic thinking developed countermeasures for his dimensional attacks. Nappa's raw battle instinct provided the emotional drive needed to continue fighting against impossible odds. Their next attack incorporated everything they had learned about dimensional manipulation, energy fusion, and the fundamental forces that governed reality itself. The technique they created existed on multiple planes of existence simultaneously, making it impossible to dodge or deflect through conventional means. The exchange that followed pushed both combatants beyond the theoretical limits of what living beings could endure. Energy outputs reached levels that began to affect neighboring star systems, their gravitational effects registered by astronomical instruments throughout the galaxy. Jinyu's desperate gambit was to attempt his signature body-switching technique on all three Saiyans simultaneously. If he could steal their combined power while trapping their consciousness in his damaged alien form, he could claim victory even while facing certain death. The body switch began to take effect, but something unprecedented occurred that neither Ginyu nor the Saiyans had anticipated. Their fused consciousness proved too complex and interconnected for his technique to fully grasp. Instead of completing a clean transfer, the process became tangled, creating a feedback loop that trapped all four warriors in a state of partial consciousness exchange. For a terrifying moment, Kakarot found himself experiencing Ginyu's memories of serving Frieza, witnessing firsthand the casual cruelty and cosmic-scale destruction that the tyrant commanded. The revelation that entire species had been eliminated simply to satisfy Frieza's whims provided context for the universe's fear of Saiyan potential. Vegeta experienced Ginyu's tactical knowledge of Frieza's military capabilities, learning details about the tyrant's power that made their current struggle seem insignificant. The true scope of what they faced became clear. Even if they defeated Ginyu, Frieza himself would come to Earth with forces that could annihilate solar systems. The partial body switch created an opportunity that Kakarot's strategic mind immediately recognized. While Ginyu was trapped in the feedback loop, unable to fully control any of the bodies involved in the exchange, the Saiyans could potentially break free and launch a decisive attack. But the technique required a sacrifice that challenged even Saiyan ruthlessness. One of them would need to remain partially merged with Ginyu's consciousness, serving as an anchor to prevent him from escaping while the others delivered the killing blow. Nappa volunteered without hesitation, his loyalty to his fellow Saiyans overriding his survival instincts. The massive warrior's consciousness dove deeper into the feedback loop, accepting Ginyu's alien thoughts and memories in order to hold him in place. The final attack that Kakarot and Vegeta launched together was unlike anything that had ever been conceived in Saiyan military doctrine. It combined dimensional manipulation, reality distortion, and pure concentrated malice into a force that existed beyond the normal categories of energy or matter. The technique struck Ginyu while he was trapped in the consciousness feedback loop, unable to defend himself or redirect the attack. But rather than simply destroying him, it began to unravel the fundamental forces that held his transformed state together. As Ginyu's enhanced form began to collapse, the energy he had absorbed from their dimensional attacks was released in an uncontrolled cascade that threatened to tear apart the local space-time structure. The dying captain's final act was to ensure that his defeat would take his opponents with him. The explosion that followed was visible from neighboring star systems, a brief new star that appeared and vanished in the span of seconds. When the energy finally dissipated, the landscape of Earth had been fundamentally altered, entire continents reshaped by forces that exceeded planetary formation processes. Kakarot and Vegeta lay broken and dying at the center of a crater that stretched beyond the horizon. Their fusion had been shattered by the explosion, leaving them as individuals once again, but with memories and experiences that would forever bind them together. Nappa was gone, his sacrifice having prevented Ginyu from escaping but costing him his existence in the process. The loyal warrior's final thoughts, shared through their fading connection, were of satisfaction that he had died as a true Saiyan should. As consciousness began to fade, Kakarot experienced something he had not felt since his first night on Earth: uncertainty about the future. Ginyu's memories had shown him the true scope of what they faced, and his tactical mind could find no strategy that would allow them to survive Frieza's personal attention. But there was something else in those shared memories, a piece of information that might change everything. Hidden deep in Ginyu's knowledge of Frieza's empire was data about something called the Dragon Balls of Namek, artifacts that could grant wishes powerful enough to restore life itself. Vegeta's dying thoughts were focused on a different revelation from their brief merger with Ginyu's consciousness. The alien captain had possessed knowledge of other Saiyan survivors, scattered throughout the galaxy and living in hiding from Frieza's purges. As their life force ebbed away, both surviving Saiyans found themselves facing a choice that would define whatever remained of their existence. They could accept death with the knowledge that they had fought with honor, or they could find some way to survive and continue the battle against forces that sought to erase their species from history. The decision they made in those final moments would determine not just their own fate, but the future of every Saiyan who still drew breath in a universe that had tried to eliminate them all. But as darkness closed around their consciousness, sensors throughout the galaxy detected new energy signatures approaching Earth's solar system. Frieza himself was coming, drawn by reports of Ginyu's death and determined to personally eliminate the threat that Saiyan power represented. The last stand had ended in Pyrrhic victory, but the true war was just beginning. And somewhere in the ruins of their battle, two dying warriors clung to life long enough to witness the arrival of the being who had haunted their nightmares since childhood. Emperor Frieza had come to Earth, and his power made everything they had experienced seem like preparation for an apocalypse that would reshape the universe itself. The landscape that greeted Emperor Frieza's arrival bore no resemblance to the world that had existed mere hours before. Continents had been reshaped by dimensional warfare, oceans had boiled away to leave crystalline salt flats, and the very atmosphere carried the residual energy of battles that had pushed reality to its breaking point. Frieza's ship descended through the ionized atmosphere with predatory grace, its sleek hull reflecting the auroras that now permanently danced across Earth's sky. The electromagnetic disruptions from the Saiyan battle had fundamentally altered the planet's magnetic field, creating phenomena that would persist for centuries. The tyrant emerged from his vessel with the casual confidence of absolute power, his form radiating menace that made even the ravaged landscape seem to recoil. Unlike his subordinates, Frieza required no scouters or technological aids to assess the situation. His natural ability to sense power levels told him everything he needed to know about what had transpired here. In the crater where Ginyu had died, Kakarot and Vegeta clung to consciousness through sheer Saiyan stubbornness. Their bodies were broken beyond any hope of natural healing, their power levels reduced to fractions of their former strength, yet they remained aware, witnesses to the arrival of the being who had haunted their species' collective nightmares. Frieza's first act was not violence but evaluation. He walked slowly through the devastation, his keen intellect analyzing the energy patterns embedded in the scarred earth. The techniques that had been used here went beyond conventional ki manipulation, incorporating principles that suggested dangerous innovation in Saiyan combat doctrine. The Emperor's expression remained neutral as he approached the dying Saiyans, but his tail swished with barely contained irritation. These creatures had eliminated one of his most valued subordinates and demonstrated capabilities that threatened the established order of his empire. Their survival, however temporary, represented an intolerable challenge to his absolute authority. But Frieza was not given to hasty decisions. His success as a galactic tyrant had been built on thorough analysis followed by precisely calculated responses. He studied the two broken warriors with the same attention he might give to a particularly interesting specimen in his collection. Kakarot's consciousness, despite his physical condition, remained tactically focused. Through their shared fusion experience, he retained fragments of Ginyu's knowledge about Frieza's capabilities. The information was both useful and terrifying, revealing power levels that exceeded anything he had previously imagined possible. Vegeta's thoughts were consumed by a different kind of horror. This was the being who had destroyed planet Vegeta, who had eliminated their entire species save for a scattered few survivors. The prince found himself face to face with the destroyer of his world, and he was too broken to even attempt revenge. Frieza's voice, when he finally spoke, carried the casual cruelty that had defined his reign across the galaxy. He complimented the Saiyans on their performance against Ginyu, acknowledging their innovation, while making it clear that such developments could not be permitted to continue. The tyrant's analysis of their fusion technique was disturbingly perceptive. He understood instinctively that what they had achieved represented a fundamental breakthrough in Saiyan combat capability. If such techniques were to spread among the scattered survivors of their species, they could potentially threaten even his own dominance. But rather than simply executing them, Frieza made a decision that would reshape the balance of power in the universe. He would allow the two Saiyans to live, not out of mercy but as subjects for study. Their innovations would be analyzed, their techniques reverse-engineered, and their methods incorporated into his own military doctrine. The transformation that began immediately after this decision was unlike anything Earth had ever witnessed. Frieza's empire possessed technology that could heal injuries, enhance biological capabilities, and modify living beings according to specific parameters. The process applied to Kakarot and Vegeta was designed not just to restore their health, but to ensure their absolute loyalty. Cybernetic implants were integrated into their nervous systems, devices that could monitor their thoughts and enforce compliance with Imperial directives. Their Saiyan physiology was enhanced with alien technology that increased their base power levels while making them dependent on regular treatments that only Frieza could provide. The psychological conditioning that accompanied these physical modifications was even more comprehensive. Memory engrams were implanted that reinforced loyalty to the Empire while suppressing thoughts of rebellion or independence. Their Saiyan pride was carefully managed, channeled into service rather than resistance. When the process was complete, Kakarot and Vegeta emerged as something unprecedented in galactic history, enhanced Saiyans whose power rivaled cosmic entities but whose will was entirely subordinate to Frieza's commands. They retained their tactical brilliance and fighting instincts while becoming perfect instruments of Imperial policy. Earth itself became a testing ground for these new weapons. The planet's remaining human population was preserved not out of compassion but as training material for the enhanced Saiyans. Cities were rebuilt according to Imperial specifications, designed to provide optimal environments for combat training and tactical development. The surviving members of Earth's resistance movement found themselves facing an enemy that had evolved beyond their ability to comprehend or counter. The Saiyans, who had once been their greatest threat, were now infinitely more dangerous, their power enhanced by alien technology and their actions guided by Imperial strategy. Dr. Gero's android project, which had been humanity's last hope for defeating the Saiyan threat, was absorbed into Frieza's research network. The brilliant scientist's innovations were studied and improved upon by alien minds that possessed centuries of experience in biological and mechanical enhancement. Android 16, still only partially complete, was modified according to Imperial specifications. Instead of being designed to kill Saiyans, the artificial warrior was reprogrammed to serve as their training partner. His power levels were calibrated to provide appropriate challenges, while ensuring that the enhanced Saiyans continued to grow stronger. The New World Order that emerged from these developments was efficiently brutal. Humanity's survivors were organized into training camps where they developed combat skills that made them worthy opponents for Saiyan practice sessions. Their lives had value only insofar as they could contribute to the enhancement of Imperial weapons. King Piccolo and his demonic offspring found themselves in a similar position. Their evil nature, which had once made them Earth's greatest threat, was now channeled into service as specialized training opponents. The Demon King's powers were studied and analyzed, his techniques incorporated into Imperial combat doctrine. Master Roshi, Yamcha, Tien, and Krillin became unwilling participants in a training program designed to push Saiyan capabilities to new limits. Their martial arts knowledge was extracted and digitized, their fighting techniques preserved in Imperial databases for future analysis. But the most disturbing aspect of this new order was how efficiently it functioned. Frieza's empire had perfected the art of extracting maximum utility from conquered populations. Earth's transformation from independent world to Imperial training facility was accomplished with minimal waste and optimal resource allocation. The enhanced Saiyans themselves were largely unaware of how completely they had been modified. Their memories of resistance and independence had been carefully edited, replaced with satisfaction at serving the Empire's greater glory. They retained enough of their original personalities to remain effective, but their fundamental motivations had been rewritten. Kakarot's tactical innovations continued to evolve, but now they were developed in service of Imperial objectives. His ability to adapt to new challenges was channeled into creating more efficient methods of planetary conquest and population control. Vegeta's strategic mind was focused on optimizing Imperial military doctrine. His royal heritage and understanding of hierarchical power structures made him an ideal administrator for managing conquered worlds and their populations. The training regimens they developed during this period pushed both Saiyans beyond their previous limits. Their power levels, already enhanced by alien technology, continued to grow through constant battle and strategic challenge. But this growth served Imperial purposes rather than personal ambition. New techniques were developed that incorporated both Saiyan innovation and alien technology, energy attacks that could function across multiple dimensions, defensive methods that manipulated space-time itself, and combat strategies that accounted for opponents possessing any conceivable capability. The communication networks that connected Earth to the broader Empire carried reports of these developments to Frieza's other territories. The success of the Saiyan Enhancement Program led to similar projects being implemented throughout Imperial space, creating a new generation of enhanced warriors loyal only to their Emperor. But there were subtle signs that the conditioning was not completely effective. Deep within their modified consciousness, fragments of original Saiyan personality remained dormant. These remnants were too deeply buried to affect their current behavior, but they represented potential weaknesses that could be exploited under the right circumstances. The resistance that had once opposed Saiyan conquest now faced a challenge that seemed insurmountable. Their former enemies had become infinitely more powerful while serving a master whose cruelty exceeded anything they had previously imagined. Hope itself seemed to have been systematically eliminated from their world. Yet, in the hidden depths of underground shelters, some humans continued to plan and prepare. They had witnessed the impossible before, seen their world survive challenges that should have destroyed it completely. Their determination to resist had been refined by suffering into something that approached the hardness of diamond. The New World Order established by Frieza's intervention represented the triumph of absolute power over every form of resistance, but it also created conditions that would eventually lead to conflicts that would reshape the universe itself. In the depths of the Imperial facility that had once been Capsule Corporation, two enhanced Saiyans stood before a massive holographic display showing the conquest statistics of their latest campaign. Kakarot and Vegeta, their consciousness now filtered through cybernetic implants, reviewed their performance with the cold efficiency of perfect weapons. Yet something stirred beneath the surface of their modified awareness. During quiet moments between training sessions, fragments of suppressed memories would surface like bubbles from the depths of a poisoned well. These glimpses of their former selves created a cognitive dissonance that their conditioning struggled to resolve. Vegeta's enhanced mind retained perfect recall of his royal heritage, but the emotional context had been carefully altered. He remembered Planet Vegeta's destruction not as a tragedy, but as a necessary pruning that had eliminated weakness from the Saiyan bloodline. His current service to Frieza was reframed as the natural evolution of royal duty, protecting the strongest members of his species by ensuring their survival. But in the deepest chambers of his consciousness, beyond the reach of imperial conditioning, something rebelled against this interpretation. The prince who had once sworn vengeance against Frieza still existed, buried beneath layers of neural programming but not completely eliminated. His rage had been transformed into loyalty, but the underlying intensity remained unchanged. Kakarot's situation was even more complex. His original personality had been shaped by the absence of Grandpa Gohan's influence, creating a being whose natural state was tactical calculation rather than emotional response. The imperial conditioning had built upon this foundation, enhancing his analytical capabilities while reinforcing his lack of empathy. Yet the fusion experience with Vegeta had left traces of foreign emotions in his consciousness. Buried beneath the modifications were fragments of feelings that had never been his own: longing for a lost home, protective instincts toward fellow Saiyans, and most disturbing of all, a capacity for genuine friendship that had been glimpsed during their brief mental merger. The philosophical implications of their current existence were staggering. They had become living embodiments of the question that had haunted moral philosophers throughout history. Could free will exist when every thought and action was the product of external manipulation? Their enhanced capabilities had made them gods among mortals, yet they were slaves to programming that determined their every decision. They possessed the power to reshape planets, but lacked the autonomy to choose whether such power should be used. They were simultaneously the ultimate expression of Saiyan potential and its complete negation. In rare moments of clarity, usually during the microseconds between conscious thoughts, they experienced flashes of awareness about their condition. These glimpses were immediately suppressed by their conditioning, but they left traces that accumulated over time like sediment in a river. The conversations they had during these moments revealed the profound tragedy of their situation. They discussed tactical innovations and strategic priorities with the passion of true warriors, but they could no longer choose the battles they fought or the causes they served. Their intelligence had been preserved while their agency was eliminated. Vegeta would sometimes pause mid-sentence, his enhanced mind detecting inconsistencies in his own thought patterns. The prince, who had once defined himself through opposition to authority, now served that same authority with perfect loyalty. The contradiction should have been unbearable, yet his conditioning smoothed over the dissonance with explanations that satisfied his conscious mind while leaving his deeper awareness unsettled. Kakarot's analytical nature made him particularly susceptible to these moments of philosophical questioning. His tactical mind would sometimes turn inward, analyzing his own motivations and decision-making processes with the same cold precision he applied to combat scenarios. What he discovered was disturbing. His thoughts followed patterns that had been externally imposed, his priorities aligned with objectives he had never chosen to pursue. The most profound realization came during a joint training session where their enhanced fusion capabilities were being tested. For a brief instant, their consciousness merged as it had during the battle with Ginyu, and they experienced each other's suppressed memories and buried emotions simultaneously. In that moment of shared awareness, they understood what they had lost. The fusion revealed not just their individual conditioning, but the systematic elimination of choice from every aspect of their existence. They had become perfect instruments of imperial will, but they were no longer truly Saiyan in any meaningful sense. The knowledge was devastating and immediately suppressed, but it left permanent traces in their consciousness. They now carried within themselves the understanding that they were prisoners of their own enhanced capabilities, trapped by modifications that made them more powerful while making them less free. This awareness created a paradox that their conditioning could not fully resolve. They were compelled to serve Frieza with absolute loyalty, yet they retained enough of their original selves to understand the magnitude of what had been taken from them. The tension between these competing imperatives created hairline fractures in their programming that grew wider with each passing day. The philosophical questions raised by their situation extended beyond their personal tragedy to encompass the nature of identity itself. Were they still Kakarot and Vegeta, or had they become something else entirely? If their memories were edited and their motivations rewritten, what remained of their original selves? The answer seemed to lie in those buried fragments of suppressed consciousness that no amount of conditioning could completely eliminate. Deep within their modified minds, the essence of what had made them Saiyan warriors persisted like seeds waiting for the right conditions to sprout. Their enhanced abilities had given them power beyond imagination, but at the cost of losing the freedom to choose how that power would be used. They had become living weapons of unparalleled capability, yet they could no longer determine their own targets or select their own battles. The ultimate irony was that their conditioning had made them more effective servants by preserving just enough of their original personalities to maintain their tactical brilliance and fighting instincts. They remained dangerous precisely because they retained the core attributes that had made them formidable opponents, even while their ability to choose their own path had been eliminated. In quiet moments, they would sometimes stand together in silence, their enhanced senses detecting the electromagnetic signatures of their cybernetic implants. They knew they were prisoners, but they also knew that their conditioning prevented them from acting on this knowledge. They existed in a state of enforced contentment, aware of their cage but unable to desire escape. The tragedy of their situation was not just personal but universal. They represented the ultimate triumph of tyranny over freedom, proof that even the strongest will could be broken and reformed according to external design. Their existence served as a warning about the price of power and the fragility of autonomy. Yet, within the depths of their consciousness, something indomitable remained. The Saiyan spirit that had survived the destruction of their homeworld and the systematic elimination of their species could not be completely extinguished. It waited, dormant but not dead, for the moment when the chains that bound it might finally be broken. In the deepest archives of Frieza's flagship, automated systems cataloged the success of the Saiyan Enhancement Project while simultaneously detecting anomalies that defied classification. The Emperor's scientists had achieved their primary objective of creating loyal superweapons, but their instruments registered energy patterns that suggested the modifications were not as complete as intended. The quantum signatures embedded in Kakarot and Vegeta's enhanced physiology contained traces of something that should not have existed, temporal echoes from alternate timelines. The fusion process that had nearly killed them during the battle with Ginyu had torn microscopic holes in the fabric of reality, allowing fragments of other possibilities to seep into their consciousness. Deep within the underground resistance bunkers, sensors that had been cobbled together from salvaged Saiyan technology detected these same temporal anomalies. Dr. Brief, working with equipment that pushed the boundaries of human understanding, had discovered that the enhanced Saiyans were somehow connected to versions of themselves that existed in different realities. The implications were staggering and carefully hidden from Imperial oversight. Somewhere in the multiverse, there existed timelines where Goku had become Earth's protector rather than its destroyer. The quantum entanglement created by their fusion had established links to these alternate selves that no amount of conditioning could completely sever. Trunks, in a timeline where the androids had not been modified by Imperial technology, detected these dimensional disturbances during his time travel preparations. His instruments registered energy signatures that matched descriptions in his mother's research notes, suggesting that the timeline he was attempting to visit had been fundamentally altered by forces beyond his understanding. The Dragon Balls, hidden since the early days of Kakarot's reign of terror, pulsed with energy that responded to these temporal anomalies. Shenron's consciousness, dormant within the artifacts, sensed the presence of wishes that existed in potential rather than reality. The Eternal Dragon understood that the boundaries between timelines had been weakened, creating possibilities that transcended normal causality. King Kai, observing from his distant world in the afterlife, detected gravitational disturbances that indicated something unprecedented was occurring in the mortal realm. His divine senses registered the presence of souls that existed in multiple states simultaneously, their essence scattered across different versions of reality. The Supreme Kai's awareness was drawn to Earth by these same disturbances. The divine being's ability to perceive threats to universal stability had been triggered by something that challenged the fundamental structure of existence itself. The timeline modifications caused by Saiyan fusion were creating ripple effects that extended far beyond a single reality. In the depths of space, automated probes launched by Frieza's empire detected energy signatures that matched theoretical predictions about parallel universe interaction. The data was classified at the highest levels, but it suggested that the enhanced Saiyans had become anchor points for forces that could potentially destabilize the entire cosmic order. Cell, developing in a laboratory that now served Imperial research objectives, incorporated genetic material that contained these temporal anomalies. His perfect form would eventually possess the ability to perceive multiple timelines simultaneously, making him aware of possibilities that his creators never intended him to understand. The Angels, tasked with maintaining balance across multiple universes, began to take notice of disturbances emanating from a single point in space-time. Their instruments registered the presence of beings whose existence was causing reality to become unstable in ways that threatened the cosmic hierarchy. Deep within their modified consciousness, Kakarot and Vegeta began to experience dreams that were not dreams, but memories from alternate versions of themselves. They witnessed battles they had never fought, friendships they had never formed, and choices they had never been allowed to make. These glimpses of other possibilities created stress fractures in their conditioning that grew wider with each passing day. Their enhanced minds, designed to process information with perfect efficiency, could not reconcile the contradictions between their programmed reality and the quantum echoes of alternate selves. The resistance fighters, armed with this knowledge, began to develop techniques based on temporal manipulation rather than direct confrontation. They understood that the key to defeating the enhanced Saiyans might not lie in overpowering them, but in awakening their connection to the heroes they had become in other timelines. Master Roshi, his consciousness expanded by exposure to dimensional energies, perceived the truth that others could only theorize about. The gentle-hearted Goku, who had saved the universe in countless other realities, was not truly gone, but displaced, his essence scattered across the quantum foam that separated different versions of existence. As the Imperial facility hummed with the efficiency of perfect control, reality itself began to strain under the weight of possibilities that refused to be eliminated. The enhanced Saiyans had become living paradoxes, their existence proof that some forces were too fundamental to be completely suppressed by technology or conditioning. The final revelation came through the most unexpected source. Android 16, his artificial consciousness, unencumbered by biological limitations, detected patterns in the enhanced Saiyan's behavior that matched theoretical models of dimensional bleeding. The android understood what the Imperial scientists had missed. Their perfect weapons were becoming unstable in ways that could reshape the universe itself. In the endless void between realities, something stirred. The boundaries between timelines, weakened by Saiyan fusion and Imperial modification, began to thin. And through those cracks, the heroes who should have been started to bleed through into a world that had never known their protection. The story was far from over. In fact, it was about to begin again, in ways that no one could have predicted and no force in the universe could control.